Hello, everyone. Before we get started, I just wanted to clarify a few things. For my day job, I supervise a staff of RAs and may or may not subject them to a constant barrage of scary movies. A few of them agreed to watch The Conjuring with me for the sake of this podcast, so I included their comments in my commentary while the show's going on. So if I ever allude to RAs, those are my students. There are also a few times where you'll hear my cat, Artemis, in the recording. He too loves scary movies and really wanted to contribute. At some point, he breathes really heavily into my mic, and I apologize for that, but I couldn't do much about it. We'd like to thank Andy Dettinger and Prin Bouchonnet for our fabulous cover art. And now, here's episode 1 of the Spooky Movie Show. The one where Renessme headbutts a closet.
Awesome. Here we go.
Okay, me too. Here we go indeed. Well, hello. Hello, Rebecca.
Hello, Alex.
What is up?
Not too much. Audio adventures, mostly.
Really, I don't know how to work computers, I think is what we've discovered already.
What is technology? We just don't know.
Right? That's what Black Mirror is about. It's a different episode.
This is a Black Mirror episode.
Yes, and that's my cat rustling plastic, so there we go. But yeah, cool. Thanks for agreeing to do this. I think we really just love horror movies and wanted to talk about them, and have chosen The Conjuring as our kind of first movie to critique and also be excited about at the same time.
Indeed. Horror has been such a great inspiration for both of us in The Bridge and our other projects. And we really love just dissecting horror movies, enjoying them, being inspired by them, being angry about them on occasion.
Oh, yeah.
So as a bit of an introduction, we're just going to tell you a couple things we love about horror in general, things that frustrate us, things that we love to see, things we maybe don't see enough. Alex, would you like to get us started?
Sure, yeah. I think for me, I really wasn't that big of a fan of horror for a long time. I spent most of my life kind of being scared of horror movies. My mom would watch them a lot, and I'd like walk in when she was watching them and be like, "Oh no!" and then walk away. Weirdly enough, I always like Tremors, though. I don't know if that's like a comedy horror, right? It's been a long time since I've seen Tremors, but that was a fond memory from my youth as my cat still hits the plastic. But for me, I never really liked horror until I became friends with you, Rebecca, and you started to talk about horror a lot. And I was like, I don't know, I mean, maybe it's not as bad as I always thought it was. And I slowly kind of started to get more into just like scary things, scary movies. I'd always, weirdly enough, loved to go to like haunted houses where people jump out and like scare you. Like that had never been a problem for me, but horror movies were. I don't know why. But yeah, I think just, knowing you and hanging out with you and like just watching horror things or having you show me just a bunch of different like genres of horror was just super eye-opening, and I started to really think about all the cool things that that this genre could be capable of.
That makes me so happy.
You did this!
Yay! I love figuring out what people are going to like and sort of curating a horror movie list for them. That has become my second job at this point. But I think for me is that I always had this fascination with scary stories, but was also completely terrified by them. And what I've come to know about myself over the years is that when something scares me, my instinct is to find out everything about it and figure out how it works and really break it down. And that makes it less scary for me, which is why I love horror movies, but not a lot of them scare me anymore because I've just made such a habit of learning the tropes, although that doesn't mean there aren't any horror movies that scare me anymore, and I certainly revel in finding them until I'm alone in my room, and then I start to regret my life choices. But anyway, horror is just one of my favorite genres. I think it has so much potential. I think it's particularly this wonderful tool of catharsis where you can look at all of these sort of personal and societal horrors and break down how they work and really explore them, really sort of inoculate yourself to them. And I find that this really powerful tool for the marginalized when horror is done right, which of course means the flip side of that is when horror is not done right, it can perpetuate some of those stereotypes and that harm instead of deconstructing it and sort of showing people fighting back against it. So horror is very hit or miss, but it is a genre that's very close to my heart, which brings us to our first movie, which I think both of us count among one of our favorites.
I do.
Maybe?
I do.
All right, so let's talk about The Conjuring.
Yeah, let's talk about it. I'm going to go close my window real quick because I think the freshmen are playing music that I'm picking up. So let me do that, and then I'll get right back to you. Didn't do it before. Good. I'm not prepared.
Dare you?
Okay, mission accomplished.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. The Conjuring. Did you want to just get into the plot?
Sure thing.
Cool. Let's do it. So when the movie opens, we open on the now infamous Annabelle, which is a very creepy-looking doll. In real life, it's a Raggedy Ann doll, which is always one of my favorite pieces of trivia there, because dolls are creepy, but when you have a possessed Raggedy Ann doll, that just, like, takes it up a notch for some reason.
Yeah, I don't know what's creepier, the doll in the movie or the thought of a possessed Raggedy Ann doll. You could go either way.
Yeah, when I watched it this time for this episode, I watched it with a couple of RAs, and they already were just, like, not into the doll. And then later one of them found out it was a Raggedy Ann doll, and they were just like, I had one of those when I was a kid, and it was, like, my size. And then I think they were a little spooked by that. So I'm going to have to give the point to the Raggedy Ann doll, I think.
I think I have to agree with you there, especially if it is one of the big ones.
Yeah, oh God, like, ugh.
You don't want to run into one of those in a dark alley.
No, thank you. Just burn it. But yeah, so we have a few people sitting on a couch. Weirdly enough, the dude in the scene is just never named. I don't really know why he's there. Like, he's not in the flashback when they're, like, going through the house with the doll. But you find out that the two young women in the scene have been living with this possessed doll. They thought that it was possessed by the spirit of, like, a young girl named Annabelle, which is why when the young girl named Annabelle asked them if she could inhabit the doll, they were like, yeah, sure, go ahead. Because that's a normal reaction to that kind of request.
Big mistake.
Yeah, the biggest of mistakes. In my notes, it just says, why are you inviting the thing to live in the doll? And then it's got, like, question mark, exclamation point, question mark, like, don't do it. Just don't do it. Yeah, and this is our first kind of exposure to Ed and Lorraine Warren, because they're there asking the three people on the couch kind of just what is happening in their lives with this situation.
And Ed and Lorraine are, of course, real-life figures, pretty divisive figures, due to some of the cases they've been involved in, most famous of those being Amityville Horror. But as fictional characters, of course, they're very engaging, instantly sympathetic to these characters that we never end up seeing again. But it's this amazing stage-setting moment, and it really tells you the tenor of the movie that you're in for.
And I think the thing I appreciate about this opening scene and the opening one that they use in The Conjuring 2, which, spoiler alert, is the Amityville Horror, is that they touch on kind of the more famous cases without making the movie about it. So you're kind of like, this is one of the bigger things that they were involved in, but here's this other thing that they were also involved in that you might not have heard of. So, like, they easily could have gone with, like, the Amityville Horror as, the sequel movie, but they didn't. Which is something that I really like.
Yeah, I absolutely appreciate that as well. So whichever way you fall on the either the Warrens are legit or the Warrens are frauds spectrum, I think you can enjoy The Conjuring for what it is.
Which is a good horror movie. Okay, so we're back at, we're still in the little flashback thing, and they show this whole thing with the two young women kind of getting haunted by this possessed doll. At one point, there's a miss me note because the two young women, like, I believe, throw the doll in the dumpster and are just like, bye, possessed doll. And when I was watching this, one of my RAs pointed out that I guess a Miss Me note was also featured in Sherlock in kind of the same handwriting.
Oh, you're right.
Yeah, I've never seen that, but I thought I would jot that down because it was of note.
And there's red crayon, of course, for Insta horror flair.
You know, because you're always going to write creepy notes in crayon. That's
oh my
how
God,
it's going to go. Yeah, it's got to be red. It's got to be red.
Otherwise, it's just embarrassing.
Right? What kind of a possessed doll demon thing are you if you can't write in red crayon? I don't know.
No self-respecting demon, honestly.
True. Yeah, so in my notes I also wrote, is it a good idea to throw the haunted doll away? You know,
rather than burn it.
Yeah, like, do you want to burn it? Like, but as, you know, you, I think, recommended the podcast Lore to me, which is also a great podcast, and he talks about the Robert the Doll story. And watching the Lore TV show, like, the wife of the dude who, like, was friends with the doll, like, tries to burn it. But then the doll comes back anyway. So it's like, can you ever actually get rid of a haunted doll? Like, you throw it away, you burn it, but you just make it mad.
This is a fair point.
Yeah. So is there a proper haunted doll disposal company out there that can help you with that?
Somebody please tell us. It might come in handy in the future.
Let us know.
Never know.
The Ghostbusters for dolls? Is that Dollbusters? I feel like that just sounds weird. I don't want that to be a company. I'm just kidding.
I think it must be like my city has this special disposal place for electronics. There has to be a special disposal place for possessed items.
I mean, that is...
And if not, can somebody make it?
That is the room in the Warrens' house, so if you have a possessed item, just send it to them. But yeah, so we're still kind of in that scene, and when we were watching this, one of my RAs was just like, where do they live that they can afford 2 singles in an apartment? And another one was like 1968, which was hilarious. I think the movie actually takes place in the 70s, so they were a little off, but it was a funny joke. And I also had made my RAs watch Insidious, so as soon as Patrick Wilson stepped on screen, they were all just like, oh no! Because he plays a very different character in Insidious. So.
That is true.
Yeah.
But he was not bringing Darth Maul along for this movie, so it was all good.
He was not. Oh my god, Darth Maul just made it not scary. So yeah, Ed and Lorraine are still talking to everyone about kind of what's going on. They explain that they let an inhuman spirit into the doll, and that's why they're being haunted by it. And you have some exposition there with like what an inhuman spirit is, and that deal. So you kind of get to see what the Warrens are about, and what their investigations are in the beginning there. And then we get to the title card, and I wrote Joseph Bishara strings over a title card. It's not as bad as like in Insidious, where it's just like, yeah, and your like ears just start bleeding. But it's there, so I put James Wan trope. One of my RAs said it sounds like a bunch of geese are getting murdered for the Conjuring music, which is actually accurate. And another one said
the next Annabelle spinoff.
Yeah, geese getting murdered. And another one said the title font was nice, so it's got that going for it. It's a nice looking title card, you know?
It is a nice looking title card.
Yeah, with that geese murder music. So yeah, and then we get to see the family that we're gonna spend the next 2-ish hours with in the movie. The parents, and they're moving into their new farmhouse.
And I believe, aside from the parents, are there 6 daughters in the parent family?
Is it 6 or 5? There are a lot of them.
There are quite a lot of them, but we get a nice establishing shot with them moving in. And really nice character building, really little but very effective moments between the family. We really get a sense of who these people are before we get to the haunting. And we get an establishing game of hide and clap, which is going to be significant later, at the end of which they discover a cellar that has been blocked off, which you never want to open that up. And you know, this starts with one of those tried and true horror movie tropes of, or really any trope, like YA books start with this all the time too, of like people moving into a new place or like coming into a new town, which I always enjoy. But a question that I wrote in my notes was, what are the statistical odds of white people moving into haunted houses?
because I feel like it just happens a lot in horror movies.
Well, I think it increases the odds when you are inclined to do things like, say, invite a ghost into a possessed doll.
Yeah, that's true, you know. You hear this, like, disembodied voice being like, hello, can I come live in this doll? And you're like, yeah, that sounds super fun. I wasn't really doing anything this Saturday anyway, so why don't you make yourself at home? We can hang.
So I guess it is more of a, is it white people moving into new houses or white people being more inclined to make boneheaded moves when ghosts are involved?
I don't know.
Question for the ages.
I know, yeah. We'll have to mull on that a little. Maybe we can answer that as we watch more horror movies for this.
It's true. We need a tally.
Yes, but yeah. So you're bringing up of the hide and clap game. It's just so good. I love the hide and clap game so much.
It's such a good device.
It is. I wrote such a good device in all caps there. Like, it is amazing. In this first instance, too, the hide and clap game gets kind of violent. Like, one of the daughters, like, pushes the other daughter, like, hard into that thing. And it was like, dang, girl, like, you just moved into this house. Like, calm down.
Sisters play rough, man.
They do, yeah. I was like, woof, woof. Oh, hello, Artemis. He came back. Hello, my cat. So the kind of violent end of the hide and clap game reveals the basement, as you alluded to. And Roger, I believe, right, their dad, takes a box of matches and goes down the stairs to check out the basement. I have some questions about these matches. Like, one, you have flashlights, so are you bringing matches? Question mark.
Well,
and, like, what is the burn life of a match? Because, like, that match was lasting for, like, a very long time. And the light radius, like, it was just, there was a lot of light coming out from that little match. Like, it was an impressive match.
I think you'd agree that Rogers are naturally inclined to be extra. So a flashlight's just not going to do the trick.
That's fair, you know, gotta get that dramatic lighting in.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. Oh, man. But yeah, so Roger goes down into the creepy basement. I don't really think anything happens, right? He sort of just sees all the stuff around this time.
Yeah, it is really just an establishing shot of that basement with some added atmosphere. But at this point, the parents have not really encountered much of anything in the house.
It's true. It's still too early. They do notice, though, that their dog, Sadie, does not want to go inside the house at all.
Oh, yeah.
Sadie's like, nah, fuck that. Like, I'm good. Sadie's good out here.
Sadie's good out here.
Sadie's good out here.
This movie is a great example of a slow burn, which I feel like is a really great throwbacky haunted house feel. I think haunted house movies and really slow burn horror had sort of been on the decline for a few years when The Conjuring came out. So this was really a great renaissance of the we know it's going to happen, but it's going to take its time maneuver, which I'm a fan of.
Yeah. And I think in interviews, James Wan has talked about, like, wanting to kind of throw it back to sort of, like, the old school, more classic style of horror. So I think the slow burn in this case definitely, like, pays homage to that.
That definitely makes sense, because during the rewatch, I was just thinking of the original Poltergeist the whole time. It's really a throwback to some of those 80s classics.
Yeah. Oh, the 80s. But yeah.
Oh, the 80s.
Yeah, so he sees the basement. Let's see, a couple funny things that IRA said. One who'd seen the movie already, don't get attached to that dog. Which, ouch, spoiler alert, don't get attached to that dog. And also, another one asked, what are all these families trying to get a new start from? Because they do allude that, like, this place is a new start for them. So, like, what dark past are you running from? Fictional movie
family band.
Yeah, what's going on there? And we also discussed the merits of doesthedogdie.com and how helpful that is.
That's a valuable resource.
It is. We can link you to doesthedogdie.com.
Very important.
In the description, it is. And then somehow we got into Insidious jump scares versus Conjuring jump scares. And, like, the uses therein. I feel like Insidious relies upon jump scares a little bit more. Like, I think The Conjuring, it definitely has them, but it uses them a lot more sparingly, and when they do happen, they're, like, more, like, impactful, I guess, because they're so sparse.
Absolutely.
Whereas in Insidious, it's just like, jump scare, jump scare, jump scare, ah!
Yeah, Insidious is pretty jump scare heavy. I think the most startling part of that movie that I remember off the top of my head is, of course, when the mother character is telling everybody about her dream and then sees Darth Maul behind Patrick Wilson.
Yes!
Which is, of course, a great shot, but also jump scare. And I feel like The Conjuring works in movements rather than in those moments. And I think it's much more effective for that.
And I think that particular scene in Insidious works so well because you see Darth Maul for like 2 seconds. I think later, my sub-bullet for that is Darth Maul ruins Insidious with a sad face. Like, as soon as the camera lingers on the red demon at the end of Insidious, who we lovingly refer to as Darth Maul, like, the whole, I think, just, like, tension of that movie collapses because, like, that's just inherently not scary.
That's very true. When you couldn't really see him when he was a silhouette or a split second, perfect. Like, your imagination fills that in and he becomes whatever you fear most. When you see him just, like, right down the barrel, that's a problem.
Yeah. But anyway, we can take down Insidious another day, but I just thought that was an interesting kind of point that we'd brought up.
Oh, absolutely. That's a good comparison.
While screening the film. But yeah, so all the clocks stop at 3:07 a.m. Ooh, I wonder if that's significant at all. And that's kind of all that happens in the nighttime. Not a lot, just some stuff. And then the morning happens, and we discover that poor Sadie the dog has died.
R.I.P. Sadie.
Yeah, poor Sadie. We hardly knew ye. And then we jump over to the Warrens' house and check out how things are going with them. Ed leads, I don't know if they ever gave this guy a name, but a visitor into the kind of haunted things museum. This person is the only black person in the movie, and then Drew, who you meet later on, is Asian, I believe. So we have 2 people of color through, like, this whole movie, which is, like, one of my, I think, main critiques of the film.
Yeah, The Conjuring, for all of its good points, is extremely white. Even by horror movie standards, it's pretty white.
Like, we could have worked a few more people in there. And I think, you know, between this visitor and Drew, they have maybe less than, like, 5 minutes of dialogue between both of them. So that's also a little disheartening.
Yeah, come on, James Wan.
Right? I believe in you, James Wan. Put some more people of color in there.
You got this, man.
But I mean, even thinking about, you know, his other films, like you have, like, the first Saw, which is pretty self-contained, or like the Insidious movies, also like hewing heavily toward like white people. Yeah, it's just a trend, and I mean, it could just be like a studio thing too. But
yeah, it's entirely possible.
Right, I'm not
out
like
of James Wan's control. So
it's all James Wan.
I apologize to James Wan if you tried.
Yes, I wasn't trying to insinuate that, James Wan. I'm sorry. It's just, you know, you notice it more and more as these things keep happening throughout the years, and it's just like, ugh.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah. So Ed is talking about all the haunted things in his haunted museum, and the visitor guy goes to, like, touch something, and he's like, no, don't touch it. And that's kind of what we get in there.
And then we sort of move through the Warren house. We meet their daughter, and we see a little bit of Ed and Lorraine's home life. And both of them allude to this event that has essentially stopped them from doing their investigations. We don't know what exactly it is yet, but Lorraine tells Ed to stop blaming himself. So even though there's a happy marriage, there's a little undercurrent of tension there. And one of my favorite things about The Conjuring is that it does run on these 2 happy relationships, the Perrins and the Warrens, that nevertheless have this undercurrent of interpersonal tension.
Yeah, it's really nice to kind of just see, like, good relationship dynamics for a change, I think, especially because, like, horror movies are so reliant upon either, like, bad relationships or just, like, people not necessarily caring that much for, like, other people. And it's very rare that you kind of see, like, a family that's not, like, super falling apart if a family's in there. Because of a lot of it's, like, these parents are about to get a divorce and all these bad things are happening that, like, brings them back together, or, you know, like, weird stuff like that.
Exactly. Yeah, it was a really refreshing change to see not just one relationship, but 2 that's really healthy and really loving.
Yeah. And then also while we're here and we're back in the Haunted Museum, Ed talks to the visitor about conduits and inhuman spirits using conduits as things, which is important for later. Dun-dun-dun. So yeah, then we go back to the parents' farm, and it's nighttime again. Specifically, it is 3:07 a.m. And this is the first instance of Christine's leg getting tugged in the bed, which is probably, to me, the most terrifying thing in this whole movie.
I think so, too.
Yeah, like, that's just a world of no. Like, that, no. I would never, ever want that to happen to myself or anyone I know, or just anyone I don't know. Just anyone.
Now, remind me, is the scene where she gets her leg tugged for the first time and the extended scene where she's looking behind the door, are those separate?
Yeah, those are separate.
That's what I thought. Suddenly I couldn't remember.
Yeah, which this movie, again, does really well. Like, usually I feel like in a horror movie, it'd be, like, the leg-pulling part, and then she wakes up, and, like, the door scene and the stuff behind her, like, would just be one scene.
Yeah.
But this, again, to go with the slow burn, is just like, I'm gonna show you a little bit of what's about to happen, but I'm not gonna give you the whole thing yet. You gotta keep watching.
It does ratchet up that tension really gradually. You get Christine getting her leg pulled, Roger, who's a trucker, leaving for a long-term trip to Florida, I believe. And then, what's her name? Carolyn?
Carolyn, the wife, yeah.
Carolyn, thank you. Carolyn's bruises mysteriously appearing as these little tidbits as we move through. And then, of course, I think the first sign that something is very amiss is Carolyn's game of hide and clap with her youngest as they're in the house alone.
Yes, yeah, we can jump down to that if you want, because that's
what do we have in between there?
Not too much, just sort of Roger being passed out at the desk. I wrote passed out overworked father, also a trope, like it's just always like a, you see some dude who's really tired being like, what's that noise? Like passed out on his desk, waking up. And I think he's walking around the house because like, something happens, I can't really remember, and then like a door opens on its own, and he walks through it, but nothing really happens there, which is again kind of the tension building. And then I did not write down the actual daughter's name because the actress who plays her is Renesmee in the Twilight series.
I think of her as Renesmee too.
Yeah, so I just wrote Renesmee Headbutts the Closet because that was the first instance of
her name is Cindy, apparently.
Cindy, that's what it is. It's Cindy. Cindy, who sleepwalks, who hasn't sleptwalked for a while, but has started to now that she's living in this house. Cindy's like hitting her head on the wardrobe, and her older sister wakes her up and stops it and gets her dad to help too. So Renesmee Headbutts the Closet. That's the first time that happens. And then in the morning, Roger goes to leave, and he finds a pigeon near the house, and it's like dying. Which, okay, like, why is there a pigeon in the countryside?
That is a good question. I think they're in New England, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I grew up in New Hampshire. I don't think I ever saw any pigeons in my small town, let alone dead pigeons left as an omen outside of my country home. Like,
if they were in, like, a city, I would feel that, like, put those pigeons there. But why are they in the country? I don't understand. That's not a pigeon place.
He traveled a very long way.
to die, sadly.
To die at their doorstep.
Gosh, yeah. So that's kind of weird, but whatever. We'll go with it. And then right before the hide and clap game that you were talking about, Carolyn and what is the littlest one? Is that April? April has the music box that she found by the river and by the tree. And is just like, I'm like playing with my little friend Rory. Like, if you play this music box, Mom, you'll see someone standing behind you at the end. Which is not creepy at all. Like, if I had a child and she was like, if you play this, you'll get to see my imaginary friend at the end of the song. I'd be like, we're mailing that to the Warrens' house. Like, they're going to keep that. No,
that
thank
is
you.
Such a trope, and it still gets me so much. Like, if any of you feel so inclined to read more creepy children, I read a great Reddit thread about creepiest things your child has said. Highly recommend.
Oh, no.
But yeah, it's the best trope because children really are creepy.
They're so, yeah. Like, they're so cute, but they also have just the capacity to just be so creepy.
Exactly.
And yes, again, to this movie's slow burn credit, Carolyn gets to the end of the song, and April jumps out instead of Rory, which sets you up for a really good scare later on when Lorraine does the same thing.
I think one of the strengths of The Conjuring is that all these little foreshadowing bits from the beginning come back around. There's nothing missed.
Right, and you're like, oh yeah, that was a thing. So yes,
Even
now
the pigeon.
Why is there a pigeon in the countryside? I just don't understand.
He's on vacation.
It bothers me so much. I went on vacation to die on that farm. Okay. So yeah, now we're at the hide and clap game, the second part, which I titled The Clappening. So yes,
Brilliant.
This scene really helps you figure out how the hide and clap game works. You kind of got it a little bit from the first scene, but this is a much longer edition of it, so you can kind of be like, oh yeah, okay, I get what's going on here. And for me, I think this is the setup for one of the best scares that happened later on. That was unfortunately featured in the trailer, so it didn't get me as much when I watched it.
Yes, and there's something about that scene that bothers me, but we'll get there in a second.
Okay, cool. I'm excited for that. And a question that I had and that my RAs also brought up when we watched it together was just, why are you playing this game on the second floor of your house?
Yeah, no. A couple times she went really close to the stairs, and I was like, this is going to be a short movie.
Yeah, I was like, dang, is she going to get pushed down it, like, by the, the ghost at this point that you think it is? And, like, yeah. So that's just not good. Like, you just moved into this house. You don't know it super well. Like, I don't think I would have played it in a house that I'd lived in for, like, most of my life on the second floor. It's just not a good idea. It's not setting you up for success.
Well, other than that slightly odd detail, this scene is just beautifully constructed. It becomes obvious at a certain point that Carolyn is following a set of claps that does not belong to April. Particularly obvious when somebody reaches out of the ominously open wardrobe a pair of decidedly not alive hands and claps to draw her closer. Thankfully, Carolyn does not get that far when April comes to find her, but she is now aware that she is following a sound that did not come from her daughter.
Yes, and that scene is just built so well, and it's just so tense, and you hear after the wardrobe opens and Carolyn kind of starts to get a little closer, she says, "I can hear you breathing."
Oh, God, I forgot about that.
Yeah, and it's like, oh, I got some news for you there, Carolyn. That's not what's happening. But it's just done so well. I really love that scene.
It's so good.
Yeah. And then I think we jump back to the nighttime again. And this is the time where Christine gets pulled off of the bed and all of the stuff happens.
Yes. And I think one of my favorite things about this scene is we never see what Christine is looking at. There's just this dark space between the door and the wall. And everything depends on the strength of the child actors, who are just great in this movie. Like,
oh, yeah, she was, like, crying. I was like, girl, I feel you. Like, I want to give you a hug. Like, whew.
I know. I was with her the whole time. Like, her terror is just palpable. And just the way that she first looks under the bed, which is, of course, this trope within itself, because everybody has that fear, and sees him that way. It's really visceral in a way.
It's just so good. And, like, the way that they use the shots to kind of convey what's happening, too. Like, she checks under the bed, and you see the upside-down shot of the door, because it's from, like, her perspective. And then you see in that same shot, like, the door slowly closing from when she's still looking, like, under the bed. And you're just like, what is happening? Like, it's just so good. And then
the door
I also...
shut. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, you're good. So, yeah, Christine starts to freak out, and she wakes up Nancy, I think, who's the other sister that she shares the room with. And Nancy's just like, what's going on? And Christine says to Nancy, "Do you see it?" Which is what I wrote, one of the worst things to hear in a horror movie ever. Also wrote, or in real life, if it also pertains to a ghost. Like, I don't know if I ever want to, yeah.
My sibling woke me up, and first thing they said was, "Do you see it?" I'd pee a little.
Yeah, I just feel like, no, I don't. I don't know. I'm not going to open my eyes. No, thank you. But yeah, and then kind of she describes, what's going on back there. Nancy just looks really confused, stands by the door, and then, as you said, the door shuts. And Christine also, at this point, is just, like sobbing, like, very upset. I wrote Christine's fear tears are all of us, because same
Oh,
Christine.
God, yeah.
And then, yeah, you know, the door slams shut, they're screaming, the family kind of runs in there, and Christine, still super sobbing and upset, says very clearly, "It wants my family dead," which is just terrifying.
And I mean, now that I am an adult, I know why people stay in haunted houses in these movies. I know how hard it must be to sell a house, but also, why are you still there at this point?
Yeah. Yeah, so that's the end of the Perrins scene right there, and then we jump back to the Warrens. And we meet Winston, the chicken who screams a little bit. Who's screaming a little.
Winston is all of us.
I know, right? Same Winston. And you have the Warrens going to investigate an attic that is not haunted, and they, you know, kind of give you rational explanations for what's going on, like this is like the pipes or like the water heating and stuff like that, as kind of a way to be like, hey, they're not always going to tell you that, like, this thing is haunted. Like, they're not just going to say it's haunted even if it's not, so that when you get them finally meeting up with the Perrin family, you can be like, okay, this is like an actual legitimate haunting within the realm of the movie. Again, whether or not you take that as legitimate in real life, that's up to you. But the movie at least wants you to know that this is a thing that's happening for them.
Yeah, this does a great job of setting the Warrens up as people who are willing to consider the other side. It certainly doesn't seem arbitrary, like it might say in a Ghost Adventures episode when they say, and we couldn't not debunk this. But it also shows that the Warrens are sort of taking these very easy cases at the moment. They're still shying away from anything that's going to have a lot of weight and a lot of threat to it.
I wonder why that is.
Dun, dun, dun.
Dun, dun, dun. Yeah, so I think one of my favorite things that they do here is, I think it's Ed who says there's always a rational explanation, and then it immediately cuts to Carolyn and her bruises. So I wrote under that, cut to not rational explanation. Because you see, as you alluded to earlier, that her bruises are just getting much worse, and at this point she's been to a doctor and is taking iron deficiency pills. Because that's what they think is happening to her and why she's so badly bruised.
And this scene leads us into the sort of set piece of the movie, this hide and clap scene that, as you said, was unfortunately featured in the trailer. But except for the nitpick I have, which we'll get to, is just extremely strong all around.
Sure. So do you want to set the scene up for us?
All right. So Carolyn is getting ready for bed. It's very late at night. And she starts hearing some noises. And then this tremendous crash. And all of the pictures on the staircase have fallen down. But as she is following these noises through the house, she realizes that something is in the basement. And she says, whoever's down here, I'm going to lock you in right now. Then the door slams shut behind her. And
guess who's locked in now?
Guess who's locked in now? And now Chekhov's matches come right back. Because at heart, Carolyn is also extra.
Yes.
And then as she lights the match and is waiting to see who's in the darkness, we get to my one nitpick. When a disembodied voice asks her, do you want to play hide and clap? I think the scene would have been better without that line, because this has already been well established for us, and this is, it sort of undercuts the hands reaching out for the darkness and clapping a few seconds after that. But in any case, that clap is just beautifully done.
It's just so well done. So she, like, gets freaked out because, like, the do you want to play hide and clap question comes. I think at this point a ball also comes bouncing out of, like, the darkness.
You're right.
And she's like, hell the fuck no. So she, like, runs up the stairs in the darkness. The matches may or may not be going out at this point. I don't remember.
I think it was burning down, yes.
Yeah, so she gets up to the top of the stairs, and the match just, like, is almost, like, on its way out, and that's when you see the hands next to her in the darkness, and you're just like, ugh, because obviously we see the hands and she doesn't see them.
Right.
Gotta love that dramatic irony, and then it just goes, and, like, just, it was so good. It was just so good.
And this is also the scene where pretty much everything starts to pop off, because we also bring back Cindy, Renesmee, Prin, and her sleepwalking. And she walks into the oldest daughter, Andrea's room, and begins to bang her head against the wardrobe again. And Andrea does this, like, really gentle thing that her father taught her and keeps her from hitting her head and says, "You can sleep with me." And then, of course, she continues to hear the sound of somebody banging on the wardrobe, even though Cindy is next to her in bed. And then Renesmee Cindy sits up, gasps, and Andrea sees this witch-like figure sort of crouched on top of the wardrobe. And so the scene that Roger comes home to from his Florida trucking is his wife screaming in the basement and his daughter screaming on the second floor.
I wrote here in my notes that that's basically Donald Glover's character Troy in Community when he comes back with the pizza and the room is just on fire. Like, that is what this scene reminded me of. He's like, "Hey everyone, what's up?" Oh no, oh no. So it's like, that's it. That's what's happening there. And I should note that I watched this movie multiple times in theaters because I just loved it a lot. And one of the times I was there, this scene in particular, like this reveal of the witch on top of the wardrobe, which, was that a Narnia reference? It might have been. Oh, James Wan, what? No, unintentional or not, it's there. But when they show this witch, someone in one of the times I was watching this jumped out of their seat, like, screamed and just, like, ran out of the theater. Like, they were gone for, like, a good, like, 10 minutes or so. And then they finally came back and everyone, like, applauded and everything for them. But, like, they were out. Like, they were gone. So hats off to whoever you were. You enriched my movie-going experience. I hope you're okay.
That's brilliant.
But yeah, so that happens. As you said, the dad comes back. Everything's just going wrong. And then and then we're in the classroom. We're in another lecture with Ed and Lorraine, and they show the exorcism footage from one of the last cases they took.
And you actually have some personal experience with this footage, right?
I do, yeah. So when I was a wee freshman in college, and I had no idea who Lorraine Warren was, but one of my floor mates did, and she was giving a talk on campus, just like about her life and her cases, and it happened to be on my birthday, so my floor mate and I decided to go see her talk, and she actually showed this exorcism footage at her talk, so I've gotten to see it in real life, and it was pretty creepy.
So, coming out of this lecture, our two sets of protagonists finally meet when Ed and Lorraine run into Carolyn, who has essentially come to beg for help.
Dun dun dun.
Dun dun dun. And now we're getting started. And of course they are they are reluctant to get into it, but Carolyn appeals to them as parents. So when she asks, "Wouldn't you do anything for your family?" that sets us up for what pretty much is the running theme in this movie.
Which is such a good theme for a horror movie again. Like, it's just so nice.
Yeah, it's very optimistic as far as horror movies go, which is a breath of fresh air. Like, it's very gentle in a way without letting up on the scares. That's why it's my comfort horror movie.
True. And yeah, in this scene too, Drew also makes his return and makes the introductions between Carolyn and the Warrens, which is cool. It's like, hey Drew, what's going on? Drew's back. And I also would be remiss if I didn't point out Lorraine's outfit in this scene is like my favorite thing ever. Like the blue ruffle thing it just looks so cool. It's so good.
The Warrens have the most spectacular 70s fashions. I am into it to the extreme.
I just love it a lot. I love it a lot.
Icons, honestly.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so then the Warrens go over to the parents' house, and some things I wrote down here. Christine looks like she hasn't slept in 10 years. Like, they did the makeup really well on her. Like, she looks exhausted, the poor little girl. And then they talk about some of the stuff that's going on. There's a rotten meat smell. There's been banging banging in threes in the nights on, like, doors, lots of dead birds, stopped clocks, and the Warrens give them sort of explanations and are like, well, if you put all these things together, it sounds like you might actually have a haunting or some sort of, like, possession thing, or something's going wrong here, basically.
And as the Warrens, especially Lorraine, who is revealed in, I believe, a title card at the beginning of the movie to be a sensitive, walk through the house, we get sort of, I don't actually know what this device is called when you run through a set of scenes or actions you've been through before, but you reveal another layer to them. But this is like what this sequence with the Warrens is, because Lorraine walks into the basement, which of course we saw several minutes ago when both Roger and Carolyn were down there. And here's just a torrent of voices. She walks to the river where April found the music box and sort of perceives this person hanging from a tree. We start to get a sense of what's gone on scene for this first maybe 45 minutes of action.
Yeah, and I like that they're like, okay, now, we've given you these pieces. It's time to try to tie a little bit of it together and let you know what's happening here. And then I also jotted down when Lorraine's standing kind of by the tree and sees the witch in the movie hanging, we had our own creepy experience with trees making that sound.
Oh, yes, of course, in Salem.
We did, in Salem. So I lived in Salem for a couple of years, and Rebecca would come visit me from time to time, and we were walking around one of the parts of downtown Salem, which is where a lot of the witch trial stuff is, and we just hear this, like, creaking in the trees that sounds much like the sound effect they use to represent the noose and, like, the rope swinging. And it was, like, the most unnerving sound I think I've experienced for a long time.
And we did some Googling afterwards, and the internet assured us that
it's normal. It's totally normal.
Trees totally make that noise, especially during winter. But it definitely sounded like perhaps a rope creaking.
Yeah, so there's that. And yeah, so right. So Lorraine gets back after she sees the witch in the tree and is basically just like, well, bad news, you're haunted as fuck. And I wrote, every step you take, every move you make, it'll be watching you, essentially, is what she gets at. She's like, this negative entity is attached to all of you, so, like, you can't really go anywhere because it's just gonna follow you, so,
Woo. But anyway, yes. We've got that scene where Lorraine is running through everything with the parents, and we see the first couple minutes of her visit from her point of view. So she actually knew that they were telling the truth from the start because she could see this dark shadow flitting around the room. So the Warrens are very much on the case from this point forward.
Yeah. And they're basically just like, I wrote the most ineloquent explanation of a haunting. Ed just goes, hauntings can be like stepping on gum. And I was just like, yeah, Ed, thank you. Thank you, movie Ed. It was great.
He's very folksy, that Ed.
He is. And they explain that they're probably going to need an exorcism, but it's going to take a while to get approval from the church because red tape. And
I enjoy the portrayal of the church as a bureaucracy like that in this movie. I feel like that adds a layer of realism to it.
I know, right? It's like, yeah, I feel that. Like, you got to get this thing done, but, like, you got to go through a lot of people to get it, so...
So, of course we believe you're possessed, but paperwork.
Yeah, right. Ooh, sorry. That the person who deals with that is on vacation. It's going to take a little while.
Yes, exactly.
Like, well, but we're possessed. They're like, I know, and we'll get there. And then they also, before they leave, record a conversation between the Warrens and the parents to talk about what's happening at their house, so they can get proof to give to the church. Dun, dun, dun.
And Dun, dun, dun. So we cut to another scene of the Warrens at home. Both a really lovely scene with their daughter as they're preparing everything, and a scene where Ed and Lorraine are researching the history of the house, which, of course, has this very troubled past that began with a woman, the witch, perhaps, that we've seen, sacrificing a child, pledging her allegiance to Satan, and then hanging herself. And there's a tidbit in here that I'm going to nitpick for a second, where they talk about how the witch, Bathsheba, had a relative who was hung in the Salem witch trials. I am leery of anything that gives legitimacy to the Salem witch trials.
Yeah.
So that is probably one of the sour notes in the movie for me.
Yeah, it's just like, ooh, did we have to try to bring that in there? Okay, all right, cool.
Yeah, we don't have to bring it there.
Just because you're in New England and there's like a, quote unquote witch behind it, like, come on now. Come on, movie.
Exactly.
Do better.
Also, there's a moment in that scene that's pretty funny. I don't know if it's intentional or unintentional, where Lorraine just rattles these details off pretty, matter-of-factly. And Ed kind of goes, oh, that will explain some things.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure. Yeah, I feel like that could go either way. But, Ed. Movie Ed. So good. Too pure. Huh?
Too pure for this world.
It could be like stepping on gum, you just kind of gotta scrape your shoe on the sidewalk a little, and that'll clear it up. So this is all happening, and they're not really watching the clock while they're giving out these fun facts about the house, but it does turn to 3:07, which I think in this scene is where Lorraine is like, oh, she died at like 3:07 or something. And the clock turns to that, and the recordings kick in as soon as they discover what's going on with that. And it should be noted that Ed figured out that Carolyn's voice didn't record at all, because he was playing back the audio and she just wasn't on it, which is strange. And then the tape player starts playing of its own accord, and you hear just kind of these really creepy, like, I think, like, ooh, or so, like that. I mean, that wasn't creepy, that was just
exactly like
my really bad Foley for that. But you start to hear, like, moans and, like, growls and stuff like that, like, just really weird things that were definitely not on that recording when they recorded it.
And then, all of that said, the Warrens come to the Perrin house to investigate for real. And they bring fan favorite Drew, as well as sort of a neutral party, a policeman who is both there for security and for Drew to have banter/sexual tension with.
Officer Brad.
Officer Brad.
I wrote Drew plus Officer Brad equals OTP, because that's where I'm at.
For real. They're the original BuzzFeed Unsolved.
Right? They really are. And also, like, I don't know if they're ever going to go into this, but, like, what is Drew's backstory? / what does he actually do? And how did they find him?
Right?
Like, why is Drew here? Like, I'm glad he's here, but, like, how did he get here?
Where did Drew come from? Where did he go?
I don't know. But yeah, I also, like, about an hour into the movie, and we break out the ghost investigators, and then James Wan trope, ? Because he seems to like the kind of ghost investigators, like, trope, or, like, a group of people a lot.
That's true. That did turn up in Insidious with the two sort of bros who hunt with Elise the Psychic.
I'm like, oh, are they, like, the audience proxy here, maybe? I'm not sure.
Entirely possible.
Maybe. Yeah, so they bust out all the ghost hunting equipment. They play, like, a really cool song while the stuff is happening, and you get this sort of montage of them, like, setting the house up in order to be able to investigate it properly. And then Lorraine and Carolyn talk about a picture of Carolyn's whole family looking super happy, and you get a flashback to their day at the beach, as Carolyn refers to it. And, she has very fond memories of it and talks about how her family was so happy on that day at the beach right before they moved into this house.
Of course, a lovely character moment for both of them, but then also something that's going to come back at a very significant moment later in the movie.
Yeah, it's a surprise scene that will help us later.
Yeah, nothing in this movie is wasted.
It's true. It's so true. And then we also get just a really weird scene of Drew flirting with, like, the teenage daughter of the parents. And I'm like, Drew, please don't. Don't do this, Drew.
Drew, stop.
Yeah.
You know you belong with Brad.
And they both say it's groovy, which is, like, I think the first time anyone's used any sort of 70s lingo in this whole film.
They remember they're supposed to be in the 70s.
Like,
They're trying as hard as they can.
We just tossed in a groovy. Like, we did it. We nailed that period piece. It's great.
They're like, it's cool. Oh, fuck, it's groovy.
It's groovy, man. So, yeah, and then we see a door that opens again, kind of calling back to when Roger was stumbling around the house alone, and a door opened. But this time we also hear a toilet flush, and it winds up that it's just Officer Brad, who was done using the bathroom.
It's the equivalent of the cat jump scare for this movie.
Yeah. Is that a cat?
Is someone throwing it?
Oh, so good. So yeah, and then they are kind of, Brad and Drew are clicking around checking the sound settings for each of the rooms, so you hear like some static sound adjustments as they do so to get any sort of voice recordings that they can. And then you have like a home movie, basically. And you have probably one of the best jokes of the movie where Ed picks up this like just giant ass camera and like puts it on his shoulder and he just goes, "Oh, it's so light." And you're just like, "Oh my god." But it was that's a good joke. It was a funny joke. So yeah, then they use Ed's light camera to film in the basement and see if they can kind of get any sort of evidence on it. Ed like hits the light that's dangling in the closet at the beginning, which I wrote was very relatable. Because he's just trying to, get that done.
Ed is a tremendous square, and I appreciate this about him. But
I know. So we go back down into the basement, and I think the thing I'm most upset about the most is we see this piano, this glorious, creepy old piano, and it never plays once.
No one, it never plays by itself.
Yeah, I'm like, someone play this piano. Like, I just really, like, this scene would have been so good with, like, the piano happening. But instead, we just get kind of them walking back up the stairs, and a door just slams shut I forget, I think Lorraine, maybe? I think the door slammed shut on someone who was trying to get out. Or, like, it slams shut right after they all get out of the thing, right?
Yeah. And then you see Officer Brad with, like, dead eyes staring at it.
Yeah. And then you get into the Drew and Officer Brad banter, where Drew's kind of, like, ribbing him for, like, being freaked out a little bit, and Brad's like, "I wasn't freaked out." And Drew's like, "Haha, you were." I can't remember the exact phrasing, but it was pretty cute.
It was the wind.
Yeah.
Well, the wind never made me look like that. In The Conjuring, we don't say "I love you." We say "the wind never made me look like that."
It's
and
true.
I think that's beautiful.
I will go down with this ship. Yeah, so we find out too through Drew and Brad that the clock has now moved to 3:08, so it's not stuck on 3:07 anymore. And Brad says something like, "Well, I believe the clock." And then we are into, like, the next morning where you're like, I don't know, is this, like, really a thing that's happening or is it not? Because the clock moved on, so maybe it's not.
And remind me where we are here.
Yeah, so we're in the morning where everyone's, like, making breakfast and super happy.
Yes.
Yeah, and then Roger and Ed, I think, maybe? Yeah, Ed's not there.
They go out to fix the car.
Yeah, they're fixing the car because they're manly men and have a heart-to-heart while they're fixing that car. I think that's after this, though. So, like, Roger takes the kids out to ice cream, and for some reason, I think Lorraine and Carolyn are the only ones left because Carolyn, they're like, "Go take a nap, Carolyn, like, you need some rest," and she's like, "Yeah, probably." And Lorraine's doing the laundry. And this is, like, one of the other good scares in the movie where it's really windy and the laundry is happening and a sheet gets blown off of the laundry line and, like, right in front of Lorraine, like, the sheet just, like, covers, like, a silhouette of a person.
And then the sheet sort of flutters up to one of the second-story windows in the house.
Yes.
And as it floats away, you see a figure standing there.
Yes.
And that is, of course, the second floor where Carolyn is sleeping. So Lorraine runs to her right away. unbeknownst to her, Carolyn is already being accosted by something who, in typical James Wan fashion, vomits some sort of black sludge into her mouth.
Why is that a trope, man? Why?
I don't know why that is a trope either, but it is definitely, like, by every law of horror movies, we all know that Carolyn is possessed at this point.
Yep.
Which is driven home when Lorraine comes up to her and Carolyn's just like, I'm fine. How are you?
What's going on? I just took a nap. It was great. I feel refreshed. Okay. So then we jump to the car scene between Ed and Roger having that heart-to-heart. And Ed divulges a little more of the backstory between the both of them and lets Roger know that last time they had, like, a very significant case, Lorraine saw something that caused her to just basically withdraw, and she locked herself in their bedroom for, I believe he said it was like a week, and just, like, didn't talk to anyone, couldn't say anything, but he didn't ask her what she saw, so he doesn't know at this point what was in her vision.
And remind me again where we are.
Yeah, we're getting close to the end. Woo woo. So we get back to the nighttime part now, and Officer Brad looks out the window, and my RAs had various reactions at this point. I got a here we go. Someone said here comes Johnny. Someone else said here comes Pennywise. So that's what we were doing. But this is the look what she made me do part. So Brad sees something, I think, in one of the side rooms and, like, walks over to start to investigate because, of course, he does. And you just start to hear the whispering of look what she made me do, which is the creepy line that they choose to reuse in this movie, which is very effectful. Effectful, is that a word? Effective. That's the word. Only had one cup of coffee today. So yeah, it's a super effective, like, creepy line. And Brad winds up getting rushed by a ghost of, was it like a nurse or something? Someone who used to live in that house.
I believe it was a maid.
A maid, that's what it was, yeah.
And then, of course, we are making up for the earlier slow burn by having everything go off at once. So at the same time as Brad is accosted by this maid, Cindy begins to sleepwalk again. And she walks up to one of the second floor bedrooms, and the door slams behind her.
Yes. And that's all framed by this really cool device that they set up earlier, wherein, like, a camera would start going off if, like, I don't know if it was, like, a temperature thing or what, but basically if it sensed, like, a ghost's movement or, like, not a human presence moving. So you just see Cindy walking and a bunch of just flashes happening while it's going on, and I think it's, like, Roger who's just like, oh, it's just taking pictures of Cindy, and then one of the Warrens is just like, no, it's not. And then they run up to kind of go see what's going on, and then can't get in, and you just see behind the door, like, just flashes still going off without knowing what's actually happening in the room.
So when they open the door, at first glimpse, Cindy seems to be gone. But when they find her in, of course, the wardrobe, where she's been trying to get into for the entire movie, they figure out that there's a hidden panel in the wardrobe.
I wrote Renesmee was in Narnia for a time there, because that's where she was hiding.
That would be a hell of a crossover.
It's the sequel that C.S. Lewis never wanted anyone to write. Sorry.
But as they are investigating this hidden part of the wardrobe, which contains, what was in there again?
There was a noose.
Yes, thank you. So as Lorraine is searching here, she falls through part of the floor. Because shit is definitely getting real at this point. And she ends up in the basement.
Oh, yeah. So yeah, I think the music box actually might have been in there too, maybe, because it winds up down there with her. Because you hear she has the music box when she falls down and starts to use that to look around, which is, again, just, like, a really good use of that music box and, like, the little mirror inside of it.
Oh yes, it's a perfect device because as she's looking through the mirror of the music box, she sees this sort of distorted vision of a woman crying behind her.
And then, you know, she does the thing where, like, she looks at the thing and it's gone, and then, like, there's another turn to the camera and it's still gone, and then, like, horror, like, comedy works in threes, so then you see Rory's mom, and you're just like, ah! So that's terrifying. And then you hear the rope sound effect again, which is my least favorite sound effect. And like, you know what's coming at this point, because like you're cued by the sound, but the body slams against basically the kind of like wall that's separating her from it. And then you just see the body slowly start to turn, which is not anything that it should be doing right now.
And as Lorraine is trying to escape, the witch, Bathsheba, grabs the locket which her daughter Judy gave to her earlier in the movie and snatches it off. And Lorraine is able to escape, but Bathsheba still has this locket, this picture, and this sort of totem from her daughter.
And then Lorraine kind of figures it out. She gets back into the rest of the house instead of walking around on the walls. And it's just like, I know what's going on. She possesses the mother to kill the child. And at that point, like, shit really pops off. Like, crosses get knocked down off the walls. Poor Nancy gets, like, dragged by her hair around the room. Lorraine grabs scissors and, like, cuts it away. Drew's in the background just kind of, like, filming all of this with a camera. And I think is it Nancy too that gets like thrown into the wall? One of the daughters also gets like just chucked into a wall.
I think it was poor Nancy.
Yeah, poor Nancy. Poor Nancy. So yeah, just like so
it's
much.
Always the kid with glasses,
right? I'm glad she didn't break those anytime that was happening. But yeah, so that's all happening. It all gets filmed, and then that's kind of I think the end, or that's the end of my notes for that section anyway.
I think the implication is that this. Film will be enough evidence for the church to step in.
Right.
And I have to imagine all this chaos is the reason that the family never thinks to ask Lorraine, hey, what was that about possessing the mother to kill a child?
Right.
Can you just repeat that?
Yeah, because it's like you just dropped kind of like a big thing there, and like that's the motive and that's what's going to happen. But everyone's like, oh no, Nancy's getting thrown into walls and like dragged around the room, and like, I don't know what's happening. Yeah. So they kind of just let that thread drop there, and no one seems super concerned. And then it's back during the daytime, and Lorraine walks outside near the tree where the witch died, and looks into the water, and well, she hears Judy's voice first, and that leads her to the water, and she sees her daughter, or a vision of her daughter, just kind of like floating by in the water, and I think you can see the same locket that Lorraine lost around the vision of her daughter's neck, and it's glowing. So Lorraine starts to freak out. She runs in the house, starts to call her mom. Has her mom check on Judy. Meanwhile, Ed's like, what's going on, Lorraine? What's going on? And she's like, shh, let me make sure Judy's okay, and then I'll explain it to you. Like, give me a minute. So Ed's freaking out, which is freaking her out more and just not helping the situation. She finally gets word that Judy's okay and, like, starts to calm down a bit, and it's just like, I saw a vision of Judy. This is not good.
Props to Lorraine's mom. Being Judy's babysitter seems like a kind of rough gig.
Right?
As we will get to in a couple minutes.
Yes. Yeah, so then they make the decision to move the Prin family into, like, this kind of motel thing. I'm not sure at this point why they're even moving them, if the ghost/witch is gonna follow them. Like, logistically, and like, logistically, I know that it's to empty the house out for the final showdown, so you don't have, like, all the daughters running around. But, like, in the story universe, it doesn't make sense, because we know that, like, it's gonna be there anyway. So, I don't know.
And even if the Prin family has forgotten about Lorraine's point about possessing the mother to kill the child, maybe, I know the Warrens are distracted right now, maybe one of them should have said, like, hey, maybe you should keep an eye on Carolyn. Gonna be kind of an issue.
It might not go well for everyone, you know? Yeah. Best laid plans. So then we cut to the Warrens with their Catholic priest liaison, I guess. I don't remember what his name is, Father something. And I just wrote in my notes the most useless priest ever, because he's just kind of like, well, I mean, like, yeah, I guess that's, you know, some evidence, but no one was baptized, so whoop.
He's the personification of a shrug emoji.
Yeah, and it's just like, the Warrens are like, dude, really? And he's like, yeah, I guess, like, good luck, bros. So yeah, they kind of just get left to figure it out. And then cut to the Warrens' house, and in my notes here I have doesthejudydie.com, which is what one of my RAs said. So yeah, do you want to talk about this scene?
Yeah, all right. So we go back to poor Judy. who is in the Warren house with her grandmother, and she is stalked by Annabelle. And Annabelle sort of chases her through the house, and as Judy locks herself in the room and is calling for her grandmother, Annabelle is in the rocking chair in the corner, and the Warrens get home. They're banging on the door. It's, of course, locked from the inside, and as they manage to wrench the door open, Judy ducks just in time for the rocking chair to fly across the room, right where she was standing. And when Judy tells Ed that the witch was sitting in the corner with Annabelle, Ed goes back to their room of creepy shit, and Annabelle's still in the case.
I wonder what's going on there.
Dun, dun, dun.
Dun, 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 dun. Yeah, and then of course, you have the it's storming trope happening outside while this is going down. It's like, yeah, of course it's raining during this. Like, why not? Why wouldn't it be? So yeah, that's that scene. In my notes I wrote, Nana, why aren't you awake? Come on, Nana. Because
Where was Nana?
Nana was just kind of sleeping through the thing. It took her a while to like wake up. Like Judy was like screaming for a good bit before Nana
Where
was like,
Nana.com?
Yeah, where'd she go? I don't know. So yeah, then we have that reunion. Lorraine's like, whew, she's okay. And then the Warrens get a phone call from Roger, who's just kind of like, yeah, so Carolyn took April and Christine, and it seemed kind of weird. So maybe something's up.
It's almost like we talked about this 20 minutes ago.
Like we gave you that hint.
Who could have predicted this?
What? So Carolyn is gone. She took Christine and April. Roger gets in the car to go meet them and tells the eldest daughter to lock the doors, close the blinds. But at this point, like, who else is gonna come for them? Like, what? Why?
She makes a trip back.
Yeah, he's like, I need the rest of you now, I guess. Like,
I forgot something.
Whoops! Everyone, get in the car. Yeah, and then I think, I wrote heartfelt moment because the Warrens roll back up with Officer Brad and Drew to help out, and Lorraine and Ed have that kind of like, are you sure you want to do this? I don't want to lose you again. We're a team. We're going to do this together. Let's go. Which is super cute.
The Conjuring is the greatest summer rom-com you could want, honestly.
It really is, especially The Conjuring 2,
The Conjuring 2 even more so.
Right in the feels. So then Officer Brad grabs a shotgun and is like, I'm going to blow this fucking door open. And he does. So
Bless,
thanks.
What a man.
Thanks, Brad. And then they get into the basement because they hear a bunch of screaming, and you just see Carolyn, who's possessed at this point most definitely, with scissors, and she's trying to kill Christine. And April's
Christine
missing.
has seen some shit at this point.
God, everybody's going to need therapy at the end of this. Like, I don't even know.
So much therapy.
Whew. Yeah. April's also missing. So they manage to free Christine, and Drew goes and shoves Christine, and he doesn't shove her, he just puts her in the car, and he's like, wait here, I'll be back. And it's like, she's very traumatized. Are you going to leave this little girl in this car?
She's like, fuck no, my dude.
Yeah, and he's like, nah, it's cool, it's chill, you got this. So poor Christine's in the car alone, and Drew runs back into the house to find April. Meanwhile, everyone else is downstairs trying to secure Carolyn. Or not secure, but just kind of, that's what they do. They pull her up and out of the attic first and try to leave the house with her, but then discover that the witch is, like, basically, like, just destroying her body if she tries to leave the house. So they're stuck with her in the house.
She is very much tied to the house at this point. Mm-hmm. So Ed is really forced to perform an exorcism. Earlier in the movie, it was alluded to the fact that he is not sort of authorized by the church to perform an exorcism. Bringing this back to the bureaucracy of the church, perhaps that's more paperwork. I think I actually saw something involving don't remember if this was fiction or one of those reenactment haunting shows, some sort of Vatican training class on exorcist certification. So maybe Ed hasn't gotten a chance to do that yet.
Maybe,
but
yeah.
In any case, there's no time. Ed has to do it. So they're able to tie her down to a chair and tie a sheet on top of her. Mm-hmm. And then we begin the exorcism sequence.
And like again, putting the sheet over Carolyn is just such a good setup for what's going to happen later on. Like it was amazing. And at this, one of my RAs also commented that that's what you do to snakes to calm them down. So great detail, I guess.
Snakes and demons.
Snakes and demons. So yeah, Lorraine runs up to the car to get the Bible that Ed's going to use for the exorcism. This set of shots is really cool because it's like just an upside down hallway shot, you know, to like symbolize just like how fucked up everything is. But it's just so great because you see her running upside down and then you like see it again when she runs back in with the Bible. And it's really cool. I like that shot a lot.
And this is another great sort of moment where Lorraine is definitely the backbone of this relationship. She both convinced Ed that they had to go ahead and do this and convinced Ed to do the exorcism. So
Just like,
Lorraine absolutely calls the shots in this movie.
Do it. Yeah, so Ed is trying to perform his exorcism when Lorraine comes back. He drops the holy water, which I wrote was a novice move. Oh no, Ed. He's just like, whoop, there it goes.
He's gormless. I appreciate that about him.
He tries, you know, it's like gum on the bottom of your shoe, Ed. Just gum on the bottom of your shoe. And then poor Christine, it cuts to a scene of Christine getting traumatized by birds crashing through her window, which is just terrifying. Which raises a philosophical question in my notes. Is it better to die in a horror movie than to live through the whole thing?
Ooh, that's a good question.
I know. And we don't have to answer it now, but I thought I would raise it because I thought of this while I was there. Like, just, yeah, I don't know.
Is a really good question. I think I would still rather live through the whole thing, but I don't know if there's some, like, workman's comp involved at the end. Like, will my insurance pay for my therapy?
Right?
Is that a qualifying life event? I do have questions.
Same. Okay, so that all happens, and then again, there are pigeons in this car. Why are there pigeons in the woods?
They're all on vacation together. It's a party bus.
Oh god, the pigeon party bus. Yeah, so that's going on. Ed can't stop, won't stop with this exorcism. He's trying real hard. And then you get the really cool payoff with the sheet wherein, like, just blood starts, like, getting spewed onto this sheet. And, like, it's really gross, but it's a very good effect.
And as we continue this exorcism, and the chair is just getting thrown all over the place, getting thrown at the Warrens and Roger, part of the sheet tears off to reveal the witch's demon face. And I remember the first time I saw it, all the hairs on my arms just stood on end.
It's like, no!
It's a great shot.
It's a really great shot. Witch in the cloth. I wrote that in all caps. And, yeah, just her face slowly morphing back into Carolyn is just also so good. And Ed just kind of stops mid-exorcism because, like, Carolyn / the witch just goes still, and he's like, I guess I did it? ? But then we get another really cool effect in this movie wherein the chair just starts to levitate up, and everyone just kind of, like, stops and watches it for a second, which, I mean, like, if I was in the same situation, I wouldn't be in this situation ever, but if I was, like, fair. I'd watch that. I'd watch that, too.
Oh, holy shit, chair's levitating.
Right, what the fuck? And then, so it levitates up, and then it flips upside down and starts banging against, like, the basement ceiling, which is so good.
And we've got these simultaneous shots of Roger trying to appeal to Carolyn's humanity, and then also Drew, sweet Drew, looking for April. So as Roger is starting to gain ground with Carolyn, sweet, dumb Drew finds April and goes, guys, I found her. She's under the floors in the kitchen.
And everyone's like, oh, especially the witch who, you know, wants to kill April. And was like, well, it's time to go then.
She's off. She's gone.
She's gone. So the witch causes some trouble. She tries to, I think, shove a bookcase onto Ed. Brad pushes him out of the way. Brad's rifle, she, like, goes off, and I think she shoots Brad in, like, the shoulder or something.
Brad gets mauled, like, a little bit.
Yeah, oh yeah,
just
Brad does get bit
mauled.
too. Yeah, a light mauling, you know. What's on the menu for today? Light mauling. So yeah, the witch is off after Drew. And everyone else is, or after April, and everyone else is running after April and the witch too. So then you get this really cool shot of kind of like the witch and April in the middle, and then Lorraine and Drew, I think, are up above, right? like in the kitchen looking down, and then Roger and Ed are kind of through the slats, like sideways in the wall, sort of like reaching out. And at this point, like, Ed's like, Roger, like, you gotta get through to your wife, like, just like appeal to her humanity, like, say some things to your wife. And Roger's basically just like, you got this, honey. Like, I believe
I got
in
your
you.
flower.
Yeah, like, yeah. It's just like the most ineffective pep talk ever. Like,
It honestly might be more realistic for that if someone was like, Rebecca, here's the person you love most in the world. Please talk them out of killing your daughter. I'd be just like, oh shit, fuck. Honey, it's okay. We don't have to kill our child. It's going to be great.
Yeah.
But
Don't stop believing, Carolyn.
Luckily for both families, Lorraine's got this, and she brings us back to that picture and that day at the beach. And we go back even further to the moment where Carolyn asks Lorraine if she wouldn't do anything for her family. Lorraine puts that question right back to her, and that starts to get through to her.
And
Power
that
of love.
Yeah, power of love. And then Lorraine, like, puts her hand on Carolyn's head and, you know, keeps kind of going. And that's enough for Carolyn to be like, oh, yeah, I don't actually want to let this thing happen, so fuck you, witch. And then, again, we throw up the witch demon. And
James Wan, why?
Yeah, just everywhere. It's, so Carolyn manages to beat the witch. The witch is vomited all over the floor. They recover Carolyn and April, and everyone kind of walks out. The eldest daughter at this point has driven a different car to the house.
Where did
so
she
they're
get
all
that
reunited.
car?
Did she steal it? Like, I don't know. I don't know how she got this car. And Officer Brad looks like he needs medical attention. Drew is smiling, and one of my RAs at this point said, Drew, you fucked up so hard, I don't know why you're smiling.
Well, guys, I think this went great.
Yeah, you know, it worked out. Oops, I mean, I made a bad, but
But you know what?
Fine.
I think we're all closer for it.
Yeah, we did it.
We've really grown as people today.
Yeah. And then April gives Lorraine her necklace back, which is, like, just a super touching moment there.
It is. Although I have to think at this moment, as I see Carolyn hugging her children, like, are any of them a bit hesitant? Are some of them like, okay, Mom, you can just stand over there?
Yeah, like, I feel like I'd just be like, no, please don't come close to me. Like, especially, like, April and or Christine at this moment, like, they have every reason to be like, no, maybe not a hug today.
Right, you know what? We're going to get there. It's going to take some time.
We'll get there eventually. Some therapy, you know, we're going to have to talk a little bit about this. Yeah.
But we have come to the end, except for, of course, the final shot.
Yes.
Do you want to set that up for us?
Sure. So, yeah, we get to the end. You know, the parents are happy. Everything's fine at the Warrens' house. And Ed walks into the Museum of Haunted Things and takes out Rory's music box and is not touching it. He's touching it with a cloth and very gently places it on a shelf. And then there's a kind of caption, I think, over that maybe with a quote from Ed Warren about, like, ghosts and demons and God and all of that. Which my RAs tried to read out loud, but they didn't read till, like, it cut out before they were done, and it was really funny. Should have read faster, kids. Should have read faster.
We need to train these kids better.
I know. I saw it. That was on me. But yeah, so the music box somehow kind of just starts, like, winding up, and you, like, hear the little sound of it and, like, see the little spinny thing spin. And you're sort of just looking into the mirror expecting something to happen.
And nothing really does. I have watched this movie a great many times to see if there's something in the mirror that I'm missing. But unless there is somebody out there who has better eyesight than I do and did catch something, I believe that nothing actually happens, which
I don't think
is brilliant.
I don't think anything happens either. Like, I've watched this movie so much, and even when I was rewatching it with my RAs, they were like, there's going to be a jump scare, and I was like, there is seriously not a jump scare here. Like, nothing is going to happen. And they were like, you're lying. But yeah, it just kind of sits on there for a second, and where you think the jump scare is going to be doesn't happen, and then it just cuts out. and goes to the credits.
What a good movie.
I know. It is such a good movie. So yeah, I probably have about like 10 more minutes or so. So if we just want to go through maybe like things we liked a lot, things we didn't like so much.
All right. Do you want to start or should I?
You can go for it.
All right. So, as I said before, this is probably one of the horror movies that I enjoy most. And I think I alluded to this earlier, but there's something kind of gentle about it, even though it doesn't let up in the scares department. It has a happy ending. It has these very, like, healthy both familial relationships and married relationships between the Warrens and the Perrins. The Warrens are really, like, cute, funny, engaging characters. It's sort of like your really nice, kind of square friends went and started hunting ghosts and being adorable, and you wholeheartedly supported them in your endeavors. And The Conjuring 2 is just as good for that. The parts I didn't like were along the lines of some of those nitpicks I mentioned earlier. A few sort of incongruous plot moments, like Lorraine figuring it out and then that never really coming up. The sort of ill-advised call to the Salem witch trials. And then, as you mentioned, this movie being really super white. But all in all, the scares are really well constructed. It's a movie with a lot of patience, which I appreciate in horror movies. It doesn't really, aside from the do you want to play hide and clap line that I would have cut, it really builds that foreshadowing without giving itself away. It does not rely on those jump scares that you might find in poor Insidious, which I do like, but it is reliant on those jump scares, whereas The Conjuring is really more like a piece of music. It has these movements within it. It has sequences rather than those moments. Everything, all of the scares sort of go on for, I would say, 3 to 5 minutes. It really takes its time to build. It has time to breathe. I think it's a really great throwback to some of the well-constructed haunted house movies of yore, Poltergeist, or anything as recent as The Others.
Such a good movie.
Such a good movie. But yeah, no, great characters, very atmospheric. 10 out of 10. Would watch again.
We'll watch again.
We'll watch again because I have it on in the background maybe like once every 2 weeks.
Yeah, I mean, I think you covered a lot of the things that I liked and things that I didn't like super, super well. I think kind of reading through this, and before we recorded this, I had just pulled up James Wan's Wikipedia page to read more about him. Because I'm not super well versed in, like, I mean, not that I'd have the opportunity to be super well versed in his life, but it was interesting to read about. And the Wikipedia page for James Wan is really dramatic. It splits his, like, movie life up into different sections. So it's like, yeah, 2007 to 2009 is called, like, Setback, because that's when, like, Dead Silence came out. And I didn't know he did Dead Silence. I haven't seen that movie. Like, I don't like puppets or dolls. So I have no intention to see that movie whatsoever, or inclination, but he made that. I didn't know it. And he also made a movie called Death Sentence, which I know nothing about.
Me neither.
Yeah, but those movies and those 2 years of his life are called Setback because James and his writing partner, Lee Whannell, I think? Whannell? I'm not sure. Were the ones who made Saw, the first Saw movie. And that's what launched them into, like, the American mainstream movie scene. And, you know, kind of reading through his page, and I think the reason I'm bringing this up is something you said, where, like, The Conjuring seems more kind of like a musical piece and is done in movements. And I think reading from, you know, different interviews that I've seen, that James, it seems like The Conjuring is very much so, like, the movie that, like, he wanted to make. I think Saw was a movie that got made to kind of, like, launch him into the mainstream. And then even, like, Insidious, I think he wanted to make a scary movie, but I think it definitely functions more kind of in that segmented, like, jump scare sort of, like, act structure. Like, it's a very, you know, it's more of a typical horror movie, I think. But I think with the success of Saw coupled with then Insidious, once he got past the the setback stage on the Wikipedia page, those movies allowed him to make The Conjuring. And then I think also make a little bit better movies or choices. I don't really know. Like when you get to Insidious 2 and then The Conjuring 2, like you can just sort of see his style, I think, bleed into the movies a little bit more. And I think you just get a better sense of like who he is like as a filmmaker in general if you look at The Conjuring, Insidious 2, and Conjuring 2.
So one, I really love that. Just that sort of walkthrough of his career and how his style built. Two, I wonder if somebody did my Wikipedia page, how much of my life they would put under the setback session.
Right? I feel that. I was like, man, my setback would be much longer than 2 years. Like, good for him for, like, bouncing back on that.
Right? Good on you,
like,
James Wan.
And, like, the section where, like, Insidious and The Conjuring, like, happen, and, like, the 2 sequel movies, that's called Resurgence.
Oh, there you go. There you go.
It's so dramatic. And then 2014 to the present is called Transformation, because he takes over the Fast and the Furious franchise from Justin Lin, who Justin Lin did, like, a fantastic job with that franchise. And then I was super excited when James Wan got a hold of that, too, to see the changes he'd make. And I'm really, really excited for James Wan's take on Aquaman, because, like, it's just gonna be so good.
Oh, yeah. I'm really excited.
Yeah.
I'm ready for the next phase of James Wan's career. James Wan, the Wanning.
The Wanting, yeah. I did see, I don't know how accurate this part of the Wikipedia is, but I think he's only listed as a producer for The Conjuring 3, which kind of makes me a little sad because, like, again, he just has, like, a very good aesthetic and, like, an eye, and, like, when he gets to do the shots he wants to do, like, they're just fantastic. And he talked a little bit about, in an interview that I read, about, like, how he had different ideas for Saw or different ways that he wanted shots to be laid out, but, like, because they shot the movie in 18 days and had a very small budget, like, he wasn't able to kind of make the movie he wanted to. Which is why I'm just like, ugh, if you just, like, keep letting him sort of, like, play with things and do stuff, like, you can end up with these fantastic horror movies, which isn't something that happens to horror movies a lot, at least contemporary ones, is they're usually sort of, like, just kind of thrown together a little bit, and they're like, yeah, you know, we're just gonna, like, do some stuff and, like, make people scream, and, like, it's cool. But his take on things, at least with, again, like, Conjuring 2, and Insidious 2, is just, like, so well put together and thought out, and, like, just such a refreshing take, I think, on things that we've seen a lot before.
And I do hope that Wan had or has some say in who was the writer or director for The Conjuring 3, because I do trust him to pick out a worthy successor for that movie.
Right. And I think from what I've seen on the internet chatter, I don't really know, I haven't seen a lot about the director or the screenwriter, but it looks like the subject might be, like, werewolves, which is, like, a really cool concept and idea for me, and I think I'd be excited to see what they do with that.
I want to see the Warrens versus werewolves. Right?
Because, like, so much, like, you know, Conjuring 1 was, like, the witch, and then 2 is, like, spoiler alert, it's a demon. But, you know, they've hewed so far into kind of, like, the ghosty demon side of, like, paranormal stuff, but, like, doing a werewolf would be just, like, such a fascinating, I think, like, new way to put the new direction, that's what I wanted, to kind of, like, lead the franchise in.
And are we getting into the 80s at this point? Like, can we get the Warrens and some denim?
Yeah, that's actually, I looked on the IMDb page, and it literally just says, like, the Warrens investigate a case from the 80s, which is all we have to go off of right now, but they will be in the 80s for The Conjuring 3.
Acid wash jeans.
Let's do it! But yeah, is there kind of any sort of final or departing thoughts that you wanted to impart for The Conjuring, or just this podcast experiment?
Well, I think just for The Conjuring specifically, I wanted to speak a little more to The Conjuring having a mostly happy ending, which I think for most of, at least, let's stick to the well-reviewed horror movies of that age. Not a lot of them were happy. Insidious 1 wasn't happy. Sinister, which was around the same time, was decidedly unhappy. And I know people who think that a good end for the protagonist sort of undercuts the earlier horror. But I think it's particularly significant for characters to come through a horror movie and come out on the other side, because it's just a really great statement on fear and on some of the traumas we endure. And I like that note of hope at the end.
I do too. You know, I feel like with any good story or well-constructed story, like you want to root for whoever the protagonists are and you want them to like come out on top at the end. And I feel like with horror movies in particular, wanting to like set things up for a sequel, like it's like, oh, you get that half victory of like, yeah, the final girl made it, but then like, you know, in like Nightmare on Elm Street, like she has another nightmare or something, or like you see like the killer like looming in the darkness, or yeah, well, freaking Nightmare on Elm Street is another story with the way that they do that ending. But
Lord.
But yeah, you know, like so often the kind of like the triumph is undercut by like, but the ghost is back because we want to make more money. And it's just like, no, like you just put these people through like this whole ordeal, like they're, and you know, in life, sometimes there isn't always like a happy resolution to something, but like it's nice to like leave the characters with like that little note of hope because, you know, seeing them go through all of these struggles and like fight this thing, like there's a point where like they've definitely like earned that bit of like happiness. And I hate it when that gets like taken away from people like that.
Absolutely. And that's why I think the anthology structure of The Conjuring is one of its strengths, because you've still got the anchor with Ed and Lorraine, but you've got this great capacity to tell a complete story with every movie and not have to rely on the monster surviving at the end to keep the franchise going.
Yeah, just like the gimmickiness of it. Just it's like it's not actually serving the story's purpose anymore. It's just serving like the franchise's purpose in general. And it's just like, meh, okay.
Absolutely.
And I feel like there's something to be said about like with like, you know, Jason or like Freddy or Mike Myers, like these things that just like cannot be killed. Like you think you kill them, but you don't actually kill them. So it's like how much it's like a hollow victory. Like you get to the end of the movie and you're like, but they're actually not dead because there's going to be another movie. So it's like, why did I just waste my time trying to care about these characters if I know that like they're screwed?
Absolutely. And well, maybe not quite to that extent. There is something a little like that in some of those Annabelle prequels, but we'll get there.
We will. Oh, Annabelle 2 makes me. I mean, Annabelle 1 makes me really mad, but Annabelle 2 just. It could have been a good movie.
We could have had it all.
We could have had it all. We should just spend an episode fixing that.
Oh, yeah.
Like, here's how it should have gone.
Oh, yeah. We will get to the Annabelle 2 Fix-It fanfic later.
Oh, yeah. Oh, God, yeah. So many thoughts. Well, cool. Thanks for chatting about The Conjuring with me. This was super fun.
Thanks for having me. This was great.
Yeah, we still need to figure out what we're gonna call this thing.
I know, right? So we can't sign off.
We can't. We're just like, well, yeah, that was us talking about The Conjuring for a long ass time. Hope you enjoyed us talking about jump scares. And Renesmee going to Narnia.
Anyway, I hope you enjoy the sound of our voices.
Yeah, you know, hopefully it was soothing. Well, cool. Thank you for chatting.
Yeah, thank you for joining us, and we hope that you will come back to talk about some future horror movies with us.
Yeah, I have no idea when this is going to go up, but if we haven't picked a new thing, or if you have suggestions for what we can watch down the line, send it to us somehow. There will be a way. We just haven't come up with it yet.
Well,
we're very prepared. You know?
So prepared. And well, thank you for listening. And if this goes up around Halloween, happy Halloween. And
that's a good idea. Let's do that.
Yeah, really. Happy Halloween, listeners.
And yeah, stay spooky. I guess. I don't know. What's a good end cap phrase for that? I don't know. So spooky. Yeah.
All right. Yeah.
I don't know.
Stay spooky, listeners.
Yeah. So I am Alex Brown.
I'm Rebecca Mahoney.
And this was our to yet be determined title podcast. Yay.
Sleep well.
Ooh, I like that.